Hello guys, today we are going to be doing a Pinafore peplum top, a reversible Pinafore peplum top. So this top is reversible. You can wear the inside and you can wear the outside. So I'll be using Ankara and a plain fabric for the inside. I'm going to be using this bodice pattern. I already made a video on how to make a bodice. Kindly check it out. The neck width is going to be 3 inches, while the neck depth for the front is 3.5 inches and the back 2 inches or 1.5 inches. I'm going to pin it on my fabric. The length I'll be using is just 1 inch below my underbust. I don't want it to be on the waist because there's going to be a band on the top. And I also have my seam allowances already in this pattern paper. So I'm going to take a chalk and mark the neckline and mark the shoulder. I'll also mark the hem down there, the waist area. Then I'll measure 1 inch from the shoulder. I'm going to be removing 1 inch from the shoulder. And down there, I'm going to be measuring my bust part or nipple to nipple, which is 8 inches divided by 2, that is 4 inches. I'm going to draw a straight line there and then I'll cut it out. So this is the back and it is unfold at the center and the neck depth is 1.5 or 2 inches. I'm going to use that to cut my front. I'll leave space for seam allowance for the center front. So I'm going to mark a 0.5 inch for seam allowance for center front and then I'll cut it out. I'm going to raise that up and then the front part I'm going to bring down the neckline. I'm going to make it 3.5 inches or 4 inches if you're big. Then I'll cut it out. The neck width is still the same with the back. This is the back and this is the front. So I've gone ahead to cut a 360-degree flare. I also have a detailed video about that. Please check it out. I'm going to raise one part of it and I'm going to slit it. The length of the flare is 10 inches plus half inch up there, half inch down there. So that is 11 inches. The waist is going to be my normal waist. This is the band. I've cut it into 2 because my fabric will not be enough to cut a full length. So I'll be using my waist times 2 as the length of this band and the width is 3 inches. I've gone ahead to cut the Ankara fabric also. The same thing, the band, the same thing. You don't have to put a joining at the back of your band if your fabric can cut the full length. Then the flare, I've gone ahead to cut the Ankara too, so I'll slit that also the same way I did for the red fabric. And the bodice part, I've cut the Ankara also, the front and the back piece. For the bodice part, I'm going to open the back piece. I'm going to place the front piece on it, right sides facing each other, and I'll sew the shoulder by 0.5 inch. I'll do the same for the Ankara piece. For the flare, I'm going to open it up and place the Ankara on the plain fabric. Then I'll pick the 2 edges and I'll try to curve the edges. I'm going to open up the flare and I'll trim the edges if there is need to. I've gone ahead to sew the two flare together. I used the 0.5 inch to sew it. Now I'm going to trim off a 0.25 on the edge all the way around the flare, just to reduce the bulkiness of the seam when I turn it. You can go ahead and put interlining, fusible interlining, known as stay or soft gum stay, all over your flare, the two flare and the two bodies. Then the band you can put only on one part of the band, because we don't want the band to be too thick, because we are going to tie it in front. But for me, I won't be putting any interlining because I sweat a lot and I can't afford to have something that will make me sweat more. So that is why I'm not putting any interlining on all my pieces. So now I've turned it out and I'm going to iron it. I'll give it a good press. When I'm pressing it, I'm going to make sure that the edge is well pressed. I'll make sure that the Ankara is not going over to the red fabric, and the red fabric is not going over to the Ankara part. It won't be showing at the end of the ironing. So the two bodies, I'm going to place them right sides facing each other. I'm going to sew here, and I'm also going to sew here and here also, but I won't be sewing this down here and down here. I'll open the shoulder seam and press it. I'll do that for the two fabrics. I'll press it properly. Then I'm going to place the right side facing each other again after pressing it, and I'm going to pin it down. I'll pin the two down. I'll make sure I arrange them properly. I will also press it if there is need to, so that it can be smooth. Then I'm going to go ahead and sew the places that I mentioned earlier. I won't be sewing the waist part of the bodice. That is the only part I won't be sewing, for the front and the back. So for the flare, I'm going to iron the edge. I'm going to go gently and make sure that I iron it well. You can use a steam iron so that the edges will lay very well. Then I will advise you to use interlining, that is stay or soft gum stay. It will help things to stay in place when you iron. So the front part, I'm going to put them together and check that they are okay. The lengths are equal. I don't want one to be longer than the other after I flip it over. Then I'm going to trim off 0.25 on all the seam allowances. Every part that I sewed on this bodice part, I'm going to trim it down so as to reduce the bulkiness of the seam when I turn it over. Then I'm going to notch the neckline all the way around. Tiny notches. Remember, I already trimmed it, so I'll be very careful. I'll put just tiny notches The next thing I'm going to do is to turn it inside out. Then I'm going to press it again. I'll make sure the edges are well pressed in such a way that the Ankara will not flow over into the plain fabric and the plain fabric will not flow over into the Ankara when I'm done ironing. So I'm going to take my time and adjust the edges properly. I'm going to turn over to the Ankara side and also press it properly. So for my band, I'm going to iron that center that I sewed. I sewed it by 0.5. Then that paper, I'm going to remove it. Then I'll iron the band all the way. I'll take the plain fabric, open the seam also, and iron it very well front and back. Now I'm going to take the flare. The waist part, I'm going to fold it into two and notch the midpoint. So if there's no joining at the center, you can use scissors to notch your center for the band. Then you place all your notches together. So I'm going to place the band, the plain fabric on the plain fabric and the Ankara on the Ankara. I'll put them together and pin them down. The flare will be in between the two bands. Then I'll pin it all the way round to the end of the flare, and then when the flare has finished, the remaining part of the band, I'll take the two and pin them together also. I'm going to be sewing this by 0.5 inch all the way around from the beginning of the band all the way to the end of the band. Then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to press it. So after sewing it, I've pressed it, then the edge of the band, I'm going to fold it by 0.5 on both sides, like I'm making a bias at the edge. So I'll fold the two inside, the fabric, the plain fabric and the Ankara, and I'll press it. Then I'll take the upper part of the top and put it in between the plain fabric and the Ankara fabric. I'll make sure to get the center of the front bodice and place it properly in between. Then I'll pin it down because I'm going to sew the edge. So I'll go ahead and iron the other part of the band. The edge, I'll fold it in by 0.5, bring it together and press it. Then I'll fold the other part of the band, the top of the band, by 0.5, and then I'll press it also. I'll iron it properly, iron it well, so that when I want to sew it, it won't give me any problem. So I decided to fold the plain fabric first so that it will be easy for me. So I'll fold it down by 0.5 and then I'll take the Ankara and fold it by 0.5 also and iron the two together. The next thing I'm going to do is to take the front part of the bodice and locate the edge of my flare and place it inside the band, making sure that the edge of the flare is straight and aligns with the edge of the front of the fabric of the front of the bodice. Then I'll pin it down. I'll do the same for the second side of the front. I'll also insert it into the band and pin it down, and then I'm going to sew on the edge from the edge of the band. From the edge of the band, I'm going to sew 0.5 all the way round the pinafore. So the bodice has been inserted into the band that way. Both the front and the back will be inserted into the band. After sewing the band, I'm going to give it a good press. So this is what it looks like. This is the back and this is the front. So you can wear either side of this peplum top. You either wear the plain part or the Ankara part. This is how it looks on the dress form. This is the peplum area. This is the inside, which is the Ankara. You can also press down this front part to give it like a lapel effect, and then you can also make the band to show the Ankara part since the Ankara is showing up there. Now I'm going to turn it to the Ankara part. This is the Ankara part. It looks so lovely. You can also press down the lapel part if you want, and when you tie the band you make the red part to show.
Thanks for watching.